So, academia is my retirement career. And prior to becoming an academic, I worked in industry in supply chain and noticed that firms typically plan supply chain very well, but struggle when things don't go according to plan. So, there's gaps between the strategy and implementation of supply chain risk management. And this is kind of the focus of my research interests. So my first goal was to try to gain this understanding of where we are as a body of literature. And there's been quite a few qualitative papers and literature reviews conducted, but not a meta-analysis. And I thought that quantitative perspective might be interesting and maybe reveal some new findings. So the framework for the paper comes from Bodie, Wagner, Peterson, and Elrum, the 2011 AMJ. And I liked this because I found many of these other frameworks, especially those that are based on the supply chain risk management process, to have a lot of overlap. And this buffering and bridging has really good discrimination, as well as it covers all of the necessary strategies. So supply chain disruptions are increasing in frequency and severity, while simultaneously firms are struggling with supply chain risk management. And this Bodie et al. Paper identifies two primary strategies that firms employ to address supply chain risk: buffering and bridging. Buffering has this internal focus, and its goal is to establish safeguards that minimize their exposure to risk. Bridging, alternatively, has an external focus and is attempting to actually influence that environment through boundary spanning actions. In addition to the framework of supply chain risk management strategies is a growing debate about how universally you can apply independent study findings. And one side of the debate is that due to factors of globalization, firms are engaging in more similar practices and strategies. The other side argues that due to national differences, different practices and strategies are required. And we focus on the potential of culture to impact those supply chain risk management strategies. So this leads us to our research questions of, one, what is the impact of buffering or bridging strategies? And two, are there cultural differences in those relationships? So we conduct a meta-analysis to systematically and quantitatively review supply chain risk management and look for patterns across those studies that would be unobservable in separate studies. We explore differences between Asia, Germanic Europe, and Anglo cultures according to the globe classification. Consistent with a meta-analysis method, we look at all the prior work done on supply chain risk management, capture as much of the population as possible, and then use criteria to screen appropriate studies. Each relevant construct was coded by its operationalization and then aggregated into broader constructs. These are more generalizable than the context-specific operationalizations. Buffering aggregated items such as flexible manufacturing, slack resources, and alternatives. Bridging aggregated items such as close relations, monitoring, cooperation, information exchange, and conducting joint activities. We use the Hunter and Schmidt method of correcting weighted effect sizes for measurement and sampling error, and these measures focus on the direction and magnitude instead of significance testing. Overall, the test of the Bodie et al. Framework is supported. It's successful at encompassing and measuring mitigation strategies in a discriminate and parsimonious way. We also identify the effect of buffering strategies and bridging strategies. The effect of both on supply chain risk management is strong and positive, although the effect size of bridging is stronger than that of buffering. In fact, the effect size of bridging strategies is outside of the confidence interval for buffering strategies. So this can help firms more effectively manage their supply chain risk by identifying those strategies that they should employ with their limited resources. We also find that there are cultural differences among these relationships, and although practices may be converging, the effects vary across different cultures. We found that both buffering and bridging strategies in Asia have the strongest effect sizes of the three cultures. In Anglican cultures, the effects of bridging were twice that of buffering, and this is the most dissimilar of the effects of the three cultures. And then in Germanic Europe, alternatively, the effects were almost the same. These are the most similar of those three cultures. So first, this is conclusive evidence to support future work explaining these cultural differences in supply chain risk management. Cultural differences shape the impact on supply chain risk management strategies of both buffering and bridging. Second, buffering and bridging strategies should not be universally applied to all cultures within a supply chain. It suggests that firms should tailor their supply chain risk management by location, and failure to recognize those differences can hinder the effectiveness of those buffering and bridging strategies. In measuring the impact of supply chain risk management on the firm, we find that supply chain risk management can be a source of overall firm performance. Previous work has shown that supply chain risk management is expensive and it's difficult to implement, but we find it can also provide benefits that surpass that investment in safeguards and information processing. So as opposed to thinking of supply chain risk management as a liability, it should be seen to contribute to the overall performance of the firm by maintaining that business continuity. Our results suggest that firms can improve supply chain risk management and firm performance by employing both buffering and bridging strategies, and should therefore be considered strategic. One of the first opportunities we identify and describe in our paper is that future work should study and report more industry-specific details. All but 2 studies just aggregated all of the industries together as either manufacturing or mixed. So this is an important area for future research because industries have differences such as levels of dynamism, the competitive intensity, market concentration, product complexity. So industry differences could lead to either buffering or bridging strategies being more effective. Second, we identify important constructs that have been identified in these qualitative studies, but there weren't enough quantitative studies to conduct a meta-analysis. So examples of missing or understudied constructs include postponement, product complexity, organizational culture. We need to understand the effect of relationships with these constructs in order to understand more complex cause and effect relationships and interdependencies of supply chain risk management. One of the benefits of a meta-analysis is the detailed analysis of operationalizations of constructs. The insufficient use of theory and lack of empirical evidence creates inconsistent use of constructs, and this causes researchers to utilize various measures of the same construct. Supply chain resilience is an important supply chain risk management construct with several overlapping meanings in the literature. So the broadest operationalization defines supply chain resilience as an outcome that includes both readiness to prevent a disruption as well as recover from a disruption. A more narrow operationalization is a dynamic capability enacted in the face of a supply chain disruption. The emphasis is quickly returning to normal or a more desirable state. And these definitions attribute readiness and prevention to robustness, not resilience. So this lack of consensus results in confusing and contradictory outcomes that lack the capability to advance theory in supply chain risk management. So given the importance of resilience within the context of supply chain risk management, the operationalizations of these constructs should converge. And only then will we be able to fully understand the construct and its relationship with other constructs. Another construct with operationalization issues is safety stock. It's one of the key items of buffering strategies. Safety stock is frequently measured by perceptions of utilization. One study included the perceived degree of use of safety stock. Another captures the perceived objective for holding inventory. They're measured by Likert scales of perceptions, which are very subjective, and future work should try to utilize more objective measures to enable comparison across studies. And some work has started to try to be more objective in their measurements, and many of those studies take the perspective of the focal firm. But we found one firm in particular which provided a very nuanced and parsimonious measure, but they take the supply chain network perspective. They measured the inventory levels of plants and suppliers separately. And due to all the interdependencies in supply chain networks, this is a really important operationalization that should be utilized in future research.